Say hi, everybody. Hello. It is great to be here in the House of Labor. I'm told that there are about 524 great labor leaders in this hall, and I am very pleased and honored to be able to come and spend some time with you this afternoon. I want to say thank you to Theo for that wonderful introduction. Thank you, Theo. I appreciate it. And I want to say to this great AFL-CIO Convention, I value you and I appreciate your endorsement in this race. Thank you so very, very much. So, many of you know me. You know where I came from. I came from working people. My dad was a steel worker. My oldest brother was a World War II veteran. 3 of my brothers are cement masons. I have a sister who was a nurse's aide in a mental hospital and a sister who was a nurse's aide in a nursing home. I know what it's like to work. I know how important it is that you have a middle-class life. And I want to tell you about America's middle class. It is under pressure. It is shrinking. It is being squeezed. And why is that? It's because for the last 30 or more years, people have worked really hard. They have created wealth, but that wealth has not been shared by the workers who created it. There was a time when workers worked hard and productivity went up, wages went up with that productivity. And about 30 or so years ago, that changed. And productivity continued to go up. Wealth continued to be created. But wages flattened out. And for many people, wages actually have gone down. And while that's happened, everything that it takes to live a middle-class life, the cost of housing, the cost of food, the cost of health care, the cost of retirement security, all those things have increased in costs, and wages have remained largely flat. And today in America, we have the greatest gap between the richest 1% and the average working person than we've had in America since the 1920s. And it's got to stop. And that's one of the reasons that I'm running for the Senate. Because I want to work for people who actually work for a living. Now, let me say to you that labor is strong when labor is united. And we were united in our fight against Senate Bill 5, were we not? Yes. We marched, we called, we talked, we argued, and we won. And we won because we were united and we knew what was at stake. And we knew the future of labor and the future of the middle class in Ohio was at stake. Let me say that nothing is more important in terms of the difference between Rob Portman and Ted Strickland than this trade issue. Rob Portman spoke to the Koch brothers' National Convention. He has co-sponsored a federal right-to-work law. Now, that's a big difference between the two of us. And that difference alone should convince working people throughout Ohio that Rob Portman is not their friend. And I'm the guy who will stand up and fight for them. I'd like to talk about trade for a little while, because we know what's happened with our trade deals. We know how our economy has been hollowed out. We know the hundreds of thousands of jobs that have gone to Mexico and China, Southeast Asia, Bangladesh, all over this globe as a result of our trade deals. Rob Portman voted for NAFTA. I voted against NAFTA. He voted 14 times to give China most favored nation trade status. I voted 14 times against giving China most favored nation status. He called himself the quarterback for the CAFTA trade agreement. He was George Bush's trade representative at a time when the trade imbalance between our country and China exploded 21%. When he was George Bush's trade representative, the International Trade Commission recommended that the president punish China for dumping steel into this country, below wage steel. And Senator Portman advised George W. Bush, the president, not to take that action against China. Senator Portman now says he's against the TPP because China manipulates its currency. He advised George Bush not to take actions against China because of currency manipulation, saying it would be counterproductive. You get my point. Rob Portman talks out of both sides of his mouth. He's had an election year conversion. He's trying to convince you that he's against the TPP when he is the best friend that China has ever had. Now, let me tell you what we can do about these bad trade deals. I've got some plans. First of all, we can stop rubber stamping these trade deals. We can make sure that before any vote is cast to grant a trade deal fast track, that draft agreement be made public for 90 days so that people can know what's in that deal before that vote is ever taken. Let me say that China hasn't stopped in their efforts to improve their conditions. They are now advocating to be called a market economy. They don't have a market economy. They have a controlled, manipulated, government oversaw economy. And if they get market economy status, that means it would be even more difficult for us to take actions against them when they violate the trade agreement. So I've written President Obama saying that this administration should take strong action opposing China's efforts to become a market status economy. Number 4, we need accountability and enforceability in these trade agreements. One analysis found that our Department of Labor has only resolved 1 out of 5 submitted complaints, that deadlines were repeatedly missed, that important groups were not even aware of the process for submitting complaints about trade violations. So I commit to you today that when I'm your senator, I will fight against these bad trade deals every step of the way, and I will stand up for American workers. I will never stop fighting until communities in Ohio and working communities across our country are no longer devastated by trade deals that benefit the multinationals, the big corporations, the pharmaceutical industries at the expense of America's working families. Now, I want to share with you some other differences between Senator Rob Portman and Ted Strickland, because in 49 days, a decision will be made regarding which one of us is going to represent Ohio in the Senate for the next 6 years. And so these are important differences, my friends. I want to fight for better wages. I heard Mr. Trumpka say to you earlier that Donald Trump thinks that American wages are too high. Donald Trump says a lot of stupid stuff, but few things are more stupid than saying that American wages are too high. You know, I want to raise the minimum wage. I think when people work hard, they ought not to have to live in poverty. Several months ago, I tried to live for just 1 week on the minimum wage. and it was not easy. In fact, I wasn't able to do it. I ate a lot of bananas because they're pretty cheap. I went to McDonald's and got items off of their dollar menu. I ate a lot of dollar menu items, and I made it for 5 days. And then I get a call from my great nephew. And he says, "Ted, I'm in town for 2 days for some special training because I'm being sent to Afghanistan. And I decided to take my great nephew out to dinner. And I broke my minimum wage effort, right?" But then, my friends, I thought this. What about all those other moms and dads or brothers and sisters or uncles that may have a loved one that's going to some battlefield somewhere to risk their lives in defense of all the rest of us, and they couldn't even afford to take them out to dinner before they left? Those are the circumstances that a lot of people face on a continuous basis. Let me tell you another experience I had as I was trying to live on the minimum wage. I was in Washington, and I had an appointment with Senator Sherrod Brown up on the Hill. And I was running late, and I found myself holding out my hand to hail down a cab. And then I pulled back my arm because I thought to myself, wait a minute, I can't pay for a cab. I'm living on the minimum wage. That's the way some people live their lives. Every decision they make every day of their lives, they've got to pinch pennies because they want to make sure that they and their families can get through the month without going without food. So we need to raise the minimum wage. We need to make sure that women get paid equal pay for what men get paid. Yes. Isn't it kind of ridiculous that in 2016, we do not have equal pay for equal work? But let me tell you what Rob Portman thinks about equal pay for equal work. He has voted 5 times. 5 times he has voted against pay equity for women. That's the kind of senator he is. Let's talk about taxes. You know, I talked about the wealth disparity that has occurred over the last 30 years. There's something else that's happened since Ronald Reagan was elected president, and that's the tax burden has been shifted from those most able to pay onto the backs of working people. It's happened gradually, sometimes, you know, with big steps, sometimes with little steps. But today, the richest among us aren't carrying their fair share of the tax burden, and middle-class people are being held down because they need a tax cut, and I intend to work to give the middle class a tax cut when I'm in the Senate. Overtime pay. I believe that when a person works overtime, they should be paid overtime. Rob Portman, as a senator, has voted to strip overtime pay from 6 million American workers. Think of that. This guy who is so privileged, who was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, who has never had to worry about whether or not his kids had access to health care or they could afford college or anyone in his family would get sick and be without health care. He thinks that people who work overtime should not get paid overtime. The auto rescue, you know, the auto rescue is a big deal for Ohio. Big deal. I think 80 out of Ohio's 88 counties have suppliers to the auto industry. It's a huge deal. And when the auto industry was on its knees, thank God that Barack Obama and Sherrod Brown and our Democratic friends in the Congress understood the need to intervene and to save this vital industry and all the jobs that went with it. And what did Rob Portman do? Rob Portman sent out a press release that said the auto rescue was a lousy deal for Ohio. Can you imagine a senator from the state of Ohio saying the rescue of this vital industry was a lousy deal? Can we talk about retirement security for a moment? You know, I think when people work hard, they ought to be able to face retirement with a sense of confidence and dignity. Well, here's what's happened. There are those in Washington who would like to privatize Social Security. Well, first of all, they want to raise the retirement age. Rob Portman wants to raise the retirement age before you would qualify for Medicare and Social Security. Let me tell you why that really angers me. It angers me because there are a lot of hardworking people who really work hard. They're not like senators who sit in air-conditioned offices with white shirts and ties and coats on. So I was talking to my niece, Anita. Theo told you about our barn being turned into a house, and my niece, Anita, still lives in that house barn today. She's a cement finisher. She's 51 years old. So I saw her a few months ago, and I asked her how she was doing, and she said, "I'm doing okay." And I said, "Are you working?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Where are you working?" And she said, "Well, I'm working at the refinery down in Catlettsburg, Kentucky." I said, "How far is that from where you live, Anita?" She said, "Well, it takes me about an hour and 20 minutes each way." And then she said, "Ted, I've been working 6 10-hour days, and I'm so tired on Sundays I don't get out of my pajamas." Now, she's glad she has a job. And she's glad it's a good union job that pays a living wage. But she works really hard. And I'm sick and tired of senators with baby soft hands who may have never done a hard day's work in their lives saying to people like my niece Anita, "You need to work longer before you can retire." I'm sick and tired of that kind of attitude. And that's the kind of attitude that exists in Washington, D.C. They don't understand. They don't understand what life is like for you and for the people you represent, because they've been pampered all of their lives and they're living in a bubble, and they don't know what it's like to worry about your families, about health care, about education, about security and retirement. They have no idea. And my friends, I want to go to Washington, D.C. because I understand. I had a dad who worked in the steel mill. I had a brother who fought the war. I had sisters who worked as nurses' aides. I had brothers who finished concrete for a living. I understand what working people go through, and I want to go to Washington and represent them. Thank you. Hey, let's go.